everybody. I am Jill Zima-Borski. I'm a local journalist in the Florida Keys. I've been a journalist down here about 26 years. And with me today, I have Rhonda Hogg from Monroe County. We comprise all the Florida Keys, and we're about 80,000 people strong. That's our population. So first, Rhonda, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and make sure I pronounced your name right?
Sure, it's Rhonda Haig, by the way.
Haig, thank you.
Sure, I'm the Chief Resilience Officer with Monroe County, and we cover the unincorporated areas of the county, not including the 5 municipalities. Been with the county for 11 years and do all things resilience related and also water quality restorations.
Well, great. We want to know what Monroe County is doing to adapt to sea level rise.
Sure, we're doing so much. So we're an island community that spreads out over 100 miles. Everybody knows the beautiful Florida Keys. We have many small islands, from Key Largo all the way to Key West. And many of those islands are at or near sea level. So they're at very low ground elevation. And so when we get hurricanes, sometimes we get whole islands that are flooded from the storm surge. And so that's really sets the background for what we're about down here. And so when we have all of these islands, we've known that we're the canary in the coal mine as far as sea level rise is concerned, because we are so low and we have so many hundreds of miles of shorelines. So for the last decade, we've been doing a lot of research and out there doing our vulnerability assessments to see where the county is most vulnerable to sea level rise. We looked at things like our wastewater system, our drinking water system, our county facilities, our habitat and the environment, and roads. And as it came to be, it turned out that roads was our biggest vulnerability because we have over 300 miles of locally maintained roads here in the Keys that we take care of. And when we ran the numbers and used the sea level rise projections from the Southeast Florida Climate Compact and crunched them with the engineering numbers, it turns out that half of our roads are going to be vulnerable to having some levels of water on them by the year 2045. So that's a lot of roads. That's 150 miles of roads that are going to need to be elevated to handle the problem. And right now, during the fall, October, November, king tides, when they're especially high, some of those roads have a foot or a foot and a half of salt water on them for weeks at a time. So that's just during the fall king tide seasons. And these are getting more widespread as the waters continue to rise. But what's going to happen is these places that are already getting wet in the fall, that's what they're going to get wet year round because they're the lowest in the county. So there's, they're spread out everywhere. And so we need to get moving on a plan. That's what we've been doing for the last decades. We put together a road elevation plan to elevate those 150 miles of roads. It tells us which roads need to be elevated, how high they need to be elevated, when they need to be elevated over the next 25 years. We went out to the year 2045 and how much it's going to cost. And that's a big number.
And I think many people may not know that I believe the highest elevation in the entire Monroe County is 18 feet. Is that correct?
I think it might be just a little higher. I think there's a hill in Key West that might be a little bit higher, but yes, most of our ground is at, anywhere from 0 to 3 or 4 feet above the ocean.
Yeah, that I think will surprise a lot of people. Now, you mentioned that we have a cost associated with our adaptation plan. How much is it and how are we going to fund it?
So it's 1.8 billion with a B. And we ran the numbers, because you don't have to elevate it all tomorrow, but we can't wait 25 years either. And actually the biggest push is over the next 5 years. We were recommending $742 million of road elevations in the next 5 years. And that's really to take care of all those neighborhoods spread throughout the Keys that are already seeing that water on the road in the fall king tide, because obviously they're going to be the ones that are going to be experiencing more and more and higher levels. And so 1.8 billion is a lot for a county of 80,000 residents. So that's going to be the real clicker here is like, what are we going to do to pay for it? So Everybody thinks, money falls from heaven, but it doesn't. There's grant programs out there, and Governor DeSantis was bold and put forward this new grant program for resilience projects in the state of Florida called the Resilient Florida Program. That's for counties and cities to apply for resilient type projects, and we applied last year was the first year, and we received 2 grants to help our first road elevation project. But there's the match is 50%. We aren't anticipating that they're going to hand out 1.8 billion to us anytime soon. Nor are we anticipating any federal partner going to hand out 1.8 billion to us anytime soon. So obviously we're going to use all the grant sources we can, but we're going to have to the county's going to have to come up with our own sources of money. Property taxes aren't going to do it because property taxes existing already, used for maintenance and of existing, county services, like all the libraries and maintenance of the existing roads and things like that. So this is a brand new program. So you can't use existing taxes for a brand new big infrastructure program. So we're looking at potentially, maybe a penny sales tax when tourists come down here. We already have one in place. Maybe we're looking at a second one to fund solely resilience projects that would raise about 30 million a year. We're looking at things like maybe a countywide flood assessment fee, something like that. People don't like taxes, but for these new type of programs, we have to figure out something. We could issue a bond and, borrow money and pay it back that way. So there's all these different avenues we are exploring to see which one or combination works best for us. And then the third part of that funding thing is, having residents also help pay, especially for the operations and maintenance, because it's going to be long-term operations and maintenance costs to run these road elevations once they're built, because there's pump stations to pump the water. Those pumps, you have to run them with electricity and they take repair and you have to replace them. So those are the types of costs we might be looking at setting up assessments in people that are receiving road elevations, where they would at least pay them operations and maintenance costs. So it's really a complex situation. Yeah.
And I was going to say, I think there's some property owners, that stand to benefit from some of the grant programs, et cetera. And some may benefit more than others. But I also know when we purchase property down here, some people knowingly bought their property in a low-lying zone versus, like we call it, the X zone above flood level. And so what might you say about how fairness will be applied? I was hearing, of course, like the ongoing maintenance might apply to certain neighborhoods, that type of thing. But what do you think about that? We have some curmudgeons in the Florida Keys. So how can we stem that tide?
Well, like I said, it is a new infrastructure program. The way I like to say it is, if we don't implement this program, look at what's going to happen. It's a lot more than $1.8 billion in homes and businesses that are going to be negatively affected. By far, it will be billions and billions of dollars of property that will no longer have access to their homes and businesses full time. So you have to look at it that way first. And then when you flip it around and say, okay, how are we going to raise this, measly 1.8 billion to elevate the roads? Like I said, I think it's fair to have the residents that do receive a road elevation, they should at least pay the operations and maintenance costs through an assessment on their particular road. That seems fair to me. And then the rest is really going to be up for discussion at the elected official level and with the community, because it's going to determine how fast we're going to be able to go on these projects. To me, a good solution would be to have that second penny tax, because the tourists actually pay 60% of that, because we have so many tourists here. When we added it up, 60% of that sum comes from tourists. So they would be funding the majority of that. I mean, they drive on the roads also. To me, that seems like a really good option. The rest, bonding and stuff like that, we may have to fill in with some of those, to help get things going. But, it's going to be tough. And are we going to be able to do 742 million in the next 5 years? Probably not. But I hope we can get it rolling, our funding program rolling here, so that we can get underway. We got lucky with a couple of grants. We do have 2 demonstration road projects, one in Key Largo and one in Big Pine, that are now funded and are about to break ground here in the summer. And, we're just going to keep trying and working with the community and working with our granting partners to keep these chunks going. We don't apply for 1.8 billion at a time. You apply for neighborhoods, but they're, they can be expensive. They can be anywhere from, 3, 4, 5 million up to 40, 50 million, depends on how big and how high those roads are. So that's kind of where we are at the moment.
Florida has 67 counties, I believe. How do we measure up compared to them? It sounds to me like we have a plan, we have some funding in place, and we've got plans for future funding. How do we stand compared to other counties?
Well, so right now, I mean, like I said, we've known what was coming. So we've been planning for a decade because I wanted to get us to this point where we now have projects we can peel off and apply to these grant sources before everybody else catches up with their data collection and their planning, because I knew there's going to be heavy competition. It's not just Florida, it's everywhere, but particularly in Florida, they're all applying for the Resilient Florida Grant Funds and anything else that comes along. And once our bigger counties to the north of us, like Miami-Dade and Broward, I mean, they're pretty far along too. And let me tell you, you're going to need a lot more millions and billions of dollars than us. So that's what I'm trying to say. We're trying to get ours in there as quickly as possible to at least get us in that thing before some of these bigger counties get their full plans in place and start, competing with us. They're kind of the elephants in the room, and we're like the little pipsqueak mice, but we squeak very loudly for money.
And the early bird gets the word,
Yes.
It seems, in this case. So some residents down here already believe in their solar panels and are driving hybrids or electric vehicles. What can neighbors do to help promote the idea of adapting to sea level rise and influencing, movement towards sustainability for the county? What can we do as residents?
Well, I think the current gas pricing, unfortunately, is probably going to help move that argument along faster than anything you or I could say. It's going to be more cost effective to drive electric cars, and will help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We're the canary in the coal mine. Everyone down here should be doing everything they can to reduce their greenhouse gas emission, because we're the ones that are going to be affected by it most severely if the climate, changes don't slow down. So that's what I tell people. It's like, your wallet does part of the talking, because it'll be cheaper for you, hopefully, to use the electric car, and you don't have to buy this expensive gas now. And your heart should be the other one. You want to protect your property here in the Keys, help reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
So I want to thank you so much. I want to give you an opportunity to, add anything you might like to add. But since this is going to be a series of interviews, of course, we may talk to you again in the future. But is there anything you'd like to add as a final statement?
Sure. Maybe one of our future topics can be talking about another program through the Army Corps and the state about raising homes and properties. That's another part of our resilience plan. I didn't want to get too much into it today because we've talked about roads so much, but yep, homes and businesses, elevations and flood proofing are another really important piece of the puzzle, as is working with private property owners and the county together to help us achieve that true resilience that we're going to need. Government can't do it all. It takes everyone working together.
Well, good. I want to thank you for that. And I think that's a great idea and a great suggestion for a future topic. And we'll talk to you again in the future. Thank you so much, Rhonda Haig with Monroe County.
Jill.
Okay,
all right.
thank you. Bye.
Bye.